Hello everyone, my name is Parvez Pirzado. I have recently completed my doctoral studies from University of Technology, Sydney, Australia. The topic of my research was teachers' understanding and practices in teaching human rights concepts in Pakistani school. This paper is based on findings from my research. The title of my paper is Intent, Implementation and Experience of Teaching Human Rights Case for Pakistani Schools. A little background about the study and the country. The study was based in Pakistan, a country under considerable socio-economic stress. Being a developing country, Pakistan faces many challenges such as poverty, a weak democratic system, security issues, gender disparities at all levels, and poor education system. Pakistan ranks low on the list of most global and international indicators, including education. It is ranked 154th out of 189 countries in the Human Development Index in the Human Development Report of 2020. The situation of human rights in Pakistan is generally not good, although Pakistan's commitment to human rights can be seen officially at national and international levels. The 1973 Constitution of Pakistan promises equal rights for all citizens, outlaws discrimination on the basis of race or language, and affirms steps to ensure full participation of women and men in all spheres of life. Pakistan is signatory to many human rights documents, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and most recently the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals, which demonstrate Pakistan's obligation towards human rights for its people. Despite these promises, on paper, commitments to human rights, the lived situation of human rights in the country is still poor. Uh, so this study was based on human rights education model. So just a little background about human rights education. Human rights education promotes awareness about human rights and ways of informing, sharing among the community at large, and particularly students and parents to develop skills to oppose violation of human rights. The emphasis on human rights education can be traced back in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but it gained attention in around 1970s. On the occasion of 30th anniversary of the Declaration of Universal UDHR in 1980, the first International Congress on Teaching of Human Rights advocated special efforts to promote human rights, particularly by stressing education. The speakers at the conference recommended recognition for human rights education and proposed comprehensive models for it and beyond the schools. In the situation about human rights education in Pakistan shows that there is a limited research on the topic of human rights education in Pakistani school and curricula. This was based on my earlier research. The private sector has introduced a few small scale and short-term initiatives related to human rights education, but the public sector education system has not instituted any regular or long-term programs. Despite this, civil society has the potential to become a stakeholder in the building of consensus on the basic principle of human rights. A review of past studies of human rights education confirmed that there has been no in-depth research on human rights education, although there were some smaller short-term initiatives. This gap need to further research on human rights education, which this study will attempt to fill. So this study was a qualitative study, and the objective was to understand and interpret the meaning of situation being studied, as per the definition of qualitative research by Patton. The study is framed by a framework called Intent Implementation of Experience, which was followed by Catherine Davis, 1994. So the study was divided in these three layers: intent, implementation, and experience. The major findings of the research were drawn from these three levels. Uh, so to gauge the intent of human rights education, the text in the core policy document was analyzed, like the core uh, documents were reviewed, starting from the country's constitution, that outlines the principles for developing policies for the whole nation and set the national context, including education. The study found that these principles are manifested in the education policy, ideally to provide a strategic direction that in turn translate into curriculum and ultimately provides guidelines for textbooks development. In fact, what was found in this study was the Constitution contained significant human rights elements, and the content in this highest policy document is rich regarding to the human rights. A country's constitution protects the rights of citizens without any discrimination and bias. This confirms that Pakistan acknowledges the importance of rights for all citizens. Further, the constitution is manifested through legislation. The document analysis shows that the education policy of 2009 also incorporates human rights concept, namely dignity, social justice, and democracy. However, the current human rights education policy does not include the rule of law and violations of human rights such as slavery and torture. Uh, while excluding such concepts might not be deliberate, it is clear that there is a lack of sensitivity and seriousness among education policymakers in regard to the inclusion of complex human rights issues in the curriculum. The 2009 education policy is considered an inclusive policy that incorporates suggestions from the education at every level. The partial inclusion of human rights education in the policy suggests uh, uh, a generally low emphasis by the education policymakers. Keeping in mind the prevalence of human rights violation in Pakistani society, it is imperative to discuss these issues through education. Nevertheless, the objective of the policy show a favorable stance toward human rights, which one of them being creating a sense of Pakistani nationhood, the concept of tolerance, social justice, democracy, their regional and local culture and history based on the basis of ideology in the constitution. In analyzing the national curriculum, the human rights concepts were found to be integrated in subjects of social studies and Islamic studies, and to some extent in the languages. The study noted that social studies curriculum include dedicated human rights related topics, both explicit and implicit topics related to human rights, such as democracy, citizenship, freedom of opinion, human dignity, equality, and cultural diversity, since the subject itself focuses on how people live and operate in a society. The review of Islamic study curriculum was found to contain themes related to moral aspects of human rights, such as dignity, equality, and diversity. These are implicitly referred to under moral themes such as brotherhood, moderation, modesty, and respect. The inclusion of human rights in this subject is perhaps due to the nature of Islamic studies, which is concerned with raising good human beings who respect and follows guidelines of Quran. While the review of Urdu and English language curricula shows a focus on reading and writing skills, these subjects do incorporate some concepts to develop students' understanding of human rights. Examples of these were ethics, character building, and culture. At the implementation level, the translation of the curriculum into textbooks shows variation in the number of and type of human rights topics offered to schools from 4 different school systems participated in this study. Uh, these 4 systems were government and 3 other systems from private and NGO schools. The analysis shows that in government schools, the textbooks used are prepared by a government publisher, whereas 3 private school systems use textbooks from 3 different private publishers. The study found that representation of human rights concepts in these textbooks is not standardized, owing to the fact that the extent to which each system follows the national education curriculum is different. At the school level, the experience of human rights was investigated through teachers' perception and understanding of human rights, as well as their observed teaching practices in the classrooms. The classroom analysis suggests there's little difference between teachers' perception and practices and the textbook they use. It's worth outlining the difficult circumstances in Pakistani schools is distant from the literature. For example, in Pakistan, 29% of schools are single teacher schools, and Sindh province, this figure rises from 47%. Further, the quality of teachers in the primary public school is also poor. The literature shows that teachers are not prepared well and unfamiliar with the up-to-date teaching methods. In this situation, it is not surprising to know that teachers have a varied understanding of human rights concepts, seen in the fact that although many of the participating teachers were able to define human rights concept briefly, they were not able to capture the concept in depth. The concepts they identify as human rights were concerned with ways to fulfill basic needs such as access to food, education, health, and income, while some related human rights with religion and open that both religion and human rights are guidelines for peaceful life. Teachers training is one dimension that could affect their perception and practices in terms of human rights. As uh, For example, according to some research, teachers and other stakeholders, and the lack of teacher training opportunities is a barrier in improving teachers' capacity to teach well. However, the willingness of teachers to impart human rights related themes in classroom is positive. But to what extent this willingness remains present in the light of demanding workload poses a problem. Classroom teaching practice is the site of human rights education. The United Nations Declaration on Human Rights Education and Teaching framework used in this study suggests three levels of competencies that a teacher should impart for effective human rights teaching: learning about human rights, learning through human rights, and learning for human rights. Once again, there was a variation in the amount of time and attention given to these three aspects. The findings also suggest that when it comes to learning about human rights, most teachers use textbooks as major source of information, but do not access any additional sources of information to support the topic further. Thus, due to a decision made by publisher, this meant that they follow only those topics which are included in the textbooks. Also, as it is was found that most teachers are not fully aware about the curriculum, so they lack the knowledge about what should be included in the textbooks and do not pursue topics which are not included in the textbooks. In terms of human rights that students were offered in the classroom, the audit of content showed that most common topics that emerged during the observation were history and background of human rights and concepts, such as universality, equality, citizenship, democracy, and elections, and topics related to moral and ethics. The findings align somewhat with Nussbaum 2006 study, who emphasizes that schools should provide learning which brings creativity, innovation, critical thinking, and citizenship concepts among children. These findings suggest that the gap in the student knowledge will be complex issues such as slavery, torture, and rule of law. The implication for Pakistani students is the textbook should cover all range of human rights as suggested by the policy and curriculum documents for a cohesive and peaceful nation. For education through human rights, there are a few instances where teachers demonstrated the ability to model human rights attitudes and behaviors through participatory teaching methodologies, such as strategies might have included small group discussions, sharing real life examples, role plays, and opportunities for students to actively engage in discussion and understand the topic well. While some of the teachers may differ to use a variety of teaching methods, for examples, brainstorming and preparing speeches, most teachers use lecture and reading from the textbook. They do not provoke thinking on human rights or engage in students. This classroom situation shows that the majority of teachers lack skills to teach human rights concepts through active involvement of students and merely transfer the knowledge and information through traditional teaching methods. The review of textbooks identified that there were suggested teaching strategies given in some of the lessons, but few teachers were observed following those ideas. This shows that most teachers only follow the content and the lesson rigidly and do not focus on the ways of working. There is a complete section in the curriculum document which provides suggested teaching strategies, which it appears that most teachers were not oriented with those strategies, mainly due to lack of training or familiarity with the curriculum. The third level is education for human rights, which entails opportunities to build actions that promote a culture of existing human rights in school and beyond. None of the participating classroom observation exhibit classroom practices encouraging action, such as working on small projects to be carried out in the community or to practice skills learned from the lesson. None of the participating teachers demonstrated the activities which would link or relate to exercising the human rights concepts in schools or community, presenting the lack of opportunities to practice skills as citizens of a peaceful and respectful nation, reflecting the education policy which is to enable the children to become good human beings and responsible citizens. The findings indicate that human rights education in Pakistan has a number of pedagogical gaps, with a reference to United Nations Declaration on Human Rights Education Teaching framework. The information about human rights is provided, but teaching strategies are not aligned to human rights, and action-related activities are entirely absent from the schools participating in the study. Such gaps imply that there should be regular opportunities for teacher training, not just content-driven, but to address pedagogy and action. In summary, while the policy intentions are favorable to human rights education, indicated at the highest level of policy documents, these do not find expression at the implementation and experience levels. The gaps lie in lack of focus on human rights in the textbooks as suggested by the policy and curriculum documents due to textbook publishing decisions. Further gaps emerge when looking at the experience at the classroom level, such as limited teacher skills in using effective pedagogy for teaching human rights, which cause incomplete understanding of how content needs to match pedagogy and action. This study has analyzed the landscape of human rights education in Pakistan. Integrating human rights education in the Pakistani education system requires advocacy at every level of education system, from policy level to classroom and community level. It is important to put efforts through advocacy and embarking on common ground, along with the integration of human rights themes in the relevant subjects and to rethink classroom approaches accordingly. This study focused on the area that was not previously researched thoroughly in a Pakistani context. Human rights are generally considered as a Western agenda among the common masses, and human rights seen as imported from the Western world. So, for teaching human rights to students, teachers themselves must understand the true sense and the spirit of human rights and use positive examples of human rights promotion in Pakistani schools. There is a need for consistent efforts to build on opportunities and existing positives and bring human rights to the forefront in the Pakistani education system. This study has foreshadowed some ways in which that might be done and build a case for human rights education in Pakistani schools. Thank you very much.